Say something, Chris.
Yeah, mic check, 1, 2, 3. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
Located on Lake Pontchartrain, Brisbee's Lakefront Restaurant and Bar offers traditional West End favorites, a scenic view, oysters, and numerous tasty options. More information is available at 504-304-4125 or brisbeesrestaurant.com. Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House has been shucking here since 1979. Located at 3117 21st Street in Metairie, Mr. Ed's Oyster Bar and Fish House offers raw, fried, and grilled oysters as well as a range of Cajun and Creole dishes. Enjoy a dozen with a smile. Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.
Good evening, New Orleans, and welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we'll talk a lot about what's going on with the New Orleans Saints, also the LSU Tigers. Possibly we'll get to the New Orleans Pelicans. We've got a great panel for you tonight to break it down. Two guys that cover the Tigers throughout the year. Also, they cover the Saints as well. Glenn Guilbeau of Gannett News and Chris Hagan of Fox 8 Sports here in New Orleans. Guys, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us as always. Always like to start off letting the audience know a little bit about what you guys are involved in. If you would, Chris, why don't you start off telling us a little bit about what's happening over at Fox 8?
Well, we've got a lot going on over at Fox 8. I guess we've hit about the peak of the high school football season. The select championships at the Dome, we'll have that covered, as well as the public school semifinals tomorrow night on Fox 8 Football Friday. Big Saints game coming up this weekend. Of course, we'll have the Lions in town, so we'll have the Fox 8 Live tailgate Sunday morning, and then the final play to wrap everything up. Obviously, a social media presence as well, fox8live.com. You can find everything we do there.
Beautiful. Glenn, how about you? Talk about Gannett News. Of course, how folks can also read all your great stuff here in New Orleans.
Well, with football season over, as far as the regular season, kind of a little lull, but not as much as usual with new coach Ed Orgeron recruiting. We find out what bowl LSU goes to on Sunday. It's going to be a very interesting December, just following Coach Orgeron, just in the news lately with the quarterback he's trying to get, the offensive coordinator he's trying to get. So it's going to be an interesting couple of months with the new coach.
Right. And they can get your stuff on USA Today?
USAtoday.com, WLAE-TV.com, and LSU Beat Tweet, and on Facebook.
Beautiful. Let's get it started. A little bit of surprise for a lot of people that thought Jimbo Fisher would be announced as the next head coach at LSU. Some people thought maybe Tom Herman may be that fallback guy. Ultimately, it is Coach Ed Orgeron who vacates the interim position, now is the permanent head coach. Glenn, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on the hiring of Ed Orgeron?
Well, I think Ed is uniquely qualified. He could end up being a great hire. I mean, he doesn't have the classic resume, but he has a resume that could really fit LSU well. Obviously, being from Louisiana, being a very good recruiter, a very experienced assistant coach. But I didn't like the way the search went. I felt like LSU settled, and I think I'm worried that part of the motivation for hiring Ed may have been because they could get him for half of what they could have got Jimbo or Herman, 3.5 a year. And I just think it was not a very exhaustive search, and they had a year to do it, really, because they knew Coach Miles was on thin ice a year ago, and I don't think they took advantage of their time. But they might end up lucky with the right coach anyway.
Chris, what are your thoughts on Coach Ed? We'll get into the process in a moment.
Yeah, I think what Glenn said was correct in the fact that he is uniquely qualified. Being from Louisiana, there are worse places to be in if you're LSU. There are some coaches, or some schools, I should say, that are going to have to go out and find coaches that maybe aren't a best fit but are the best on the market. Ed Orgeron is a good fit, but like you said, I think they could have done their due diligence a little bit more. That being said, I think one of the benefits of Ed Orgeron is that he's very much a crowd pleaser. You saw some of the changes he made when he came in right away that the players loved, even the media loved, opening up practices. I think he's very in touch with the fan, not so much above them as some coaches. I think he sees that fans are crying for offense. They're upset that they didn't get Herman or Fisher because they would have brought what you assume would be a more prolific passing offense. But I think he's going to do his due diligence and go out and get a coordinator. Otherwise, he could very well suffer the same fate as Les Miles.
Well, let's talk about the process because, as Glenn mentioned, a lot of people felt that behind the scenes that maybe there had been some contact with Guilbeau Fisher and that they were working very diligently to get that done. So many rumors out there of what could have happened, what could have happened. $6.8 million a year to $8 million a year is some of the numbers that were thrown out. That he was offered a 5-year deal. He wanted somewhere between 8 and 10 years. One of the reasons why I suppose he wanted that type of a contract was he's got a pretty good stable of players at Florida State, freshmen, sophomores that are really going to compete over the next few seasons. Didn't want to leave obviously there without some assurances that he'd have a chance to really build things at LSU. Let's take Fisher first, and Glenn, you were involved in this. You were speaking to boosters. You were talking to a lot of people behind the scenes. What happened with Guilbeau Fisher?
Well, I can tell you the Tuesday night before Thanksgiving, I spoke to Jimmy Sexton on the phone, and he said that he thought Guilbeau Fisher was LSU's guy, meaning LSU's target. But he thought that Ed Orgeron's popularity with the fans and half the board and powers that be was complicating it. And I think that's really what happened. People were really split over Orgeron and a new coach. And basically, if Guilbeau Fisher wanted to be the LSU coach, he'd be the coach right now. But he didn't want the job. And I think probably because they didn't offer him enough money or a large enough contract. If you're going to hire a guy like Guilbeau Fisher, a sitting national championship coach, the closest thing to Nick Saban going right now, I would say, other than Urban Meyer, but you don't have a chance at Urban Meyer. I mean, you got to do more than give him a raise from 5.2 to 6. I mean, you got to wow him. You got to give him more than that, or make it a long-term contract, or something. But even if they would have done all that, he still might not have come. But I think they should have tried harder. And then they went to Tom Herman, and frankly, I don't think they tried hard enough for him either.
What were you hearing? What were you? Obviously, you've been engaged with what's going up in Baton Rouge. You've been covering them all year long. What were your sources telling you?
My take on it is that at some point, do you think that the powers that be were a little bit skeptical of bringing in Herman, who may have been trying to leverage them, a guy who wants all this power, yet he's only been a head coach for 2 years. Maybe he is the next best thing, but at the same time, coming off of Les Miles and a guy who is really in charge of that program, I think Ed Orgeron's a guy that they may be able to have more on a leash. And like Glenn was saying, if you bring in a Guilbeau Fisher, you're going to have to do more than just give him money. You're going to have to give him power of the program, power to move things and progress things the way he wants to, and maybe there's a bit of nervousness there.
Glenn, when we talked on the radio show, there were a lot of rumors out there that he was looking for a housing allowance, that he was looking, because of Florida not having state income tax, something you wrote about, something I had not thought about, that, again, he needed more than just dollars to be able to augment, some of the loss in numbers that he was going to get if he stayed at Florida State. As I mentioned, 8 to 10 years, wanted maybe a long deal. How much did that play into this? Maybe LSU backing off a bit.
Well, it's definitely was complicated to get Guilbeau. Expensive, and I don't think LSU was ready to make that bold move like Michigan was to get Harbaugh, or Alabama was to to get Saban. You know, if you want to shoot high, you got to pay for it, and you got to do that. And I think they kind of took the easy way out and settled. And you know, if you want a coach you can keep on your leash, like you said, I think that's true too. But you know, the coaches who aren't on leashes tend to win national championships. Yeah. You know, so it's what you want. I think LSU may have been intimidated by this process somewhat.
That's interesting because Oliva really blew it at the end of last season. And,
sure.
And I think he misinterpreted what the fans were saying. I think the fans were saying, thank you, Les Miles. You were a great steward of the program. You were a gentleman. You were a father figure. You kept this program going when Nick Saban defected to the NFL. I don't think the majority of those people were saying, hey, Les, come back. Then Les gets an opportunity to come back, and he's told, okay, change the offensive coordinator, change the offense, and you'll be fine. He doesn't do that. When the offense wasn't changed and you knew he was going to be stubborn, at that point you would think Oliva would be out there getting feelers on who really wanted the job, even if Fisher was the target going forward. And it seems
sure.
like they put all their eggs in Fisher's basket, and then when Fisher balked on them, there was a little bit of a panic. Chris?
I totally agree with the panic there, because then while there may be another coach out there, I think the longer it goes, the more nervous you get because of the recruiting situation, which is obviously even volatile with Ed Orgeron. You don't want to be sitting in limbo without a head coach. And if Fisher was the guy, I think a lot of recruits would have been happy with that. A lot of people were ready for that. But like you said, when he wasn't there, it becomes between Herman and Orgeron, and Texas has the leverage there with Herman. You got to go with the guy who you're familiar with, and you know it could be considered settling. I think it is in some way. But like I said, there's worse positions to be in. So I think that weighed heavily on the decision to go with Orgeron.
Did Herman try to leverage them? Was there a situation where there was an ultimatum that was given to Herman? Take the deal, what was it, by Thursday or Friday? By Friday, if you don't take the deal, we're moving on?
I'm not sure about that specifically, but yeah, Herman tried to leverage LSU. And Joe Oliva tried to leverage Tennessee when they offered him a job to be athletic director several years ago, and he got more money from LSU. That's the market. That's America. Sure. If you're up for two jobs, anybody's going to leverage it. And Joe Oliva acting aghast at Herman doing that just illustrates the novice that he is in this search. He was not used to these type of deep waters. And he said, well, we wanted Coach Orgeron because he's not going to play games with us. Well, yeah, Coach Orgeron doesn't have a card to play games with because nobody else is trying to hire him. If you're going to hire the best coach, you got to deal with that type of stuff. And Oliva was not ready for that.
They claimed, at least it was reported, 12 to 15 candidates were vetted before they got down to the final three of Fisher, Herman, and Orgeron. You buy that?
No, I don't buy that. I mean, you know, I'd like to know what they mean by how far did you vet them? I mean, they had a year. They should have identified a couple of guys after Fisher and Herman, because regardless of what happened last year, you know Les Miles was on thin ice. So chances are you knew you might be looking for a coach. So they should have done more work during the offseason last year, and they should have done more work since September 24th. I mean, my Texas hired a coach in one day.
Right.
LSU had a year, and they ended up with a guy that was on their staff.
Do you believe that they vetted 12 to 15 candidates? Does it look like they did?
No, because I'm with Glenn. I think from the start, from the day that Les Miles was fired, Guilbeau was the first name out of everyone's mouth because it was, reportedly close to happening back in 2015 at the end of the season. And so you do need that backup plan. You've got to know the college football landscape. You've got to know what it's possibly going to take to get Jimbo Fisher. You've got to know that Texas has a coach on just as thin of ice as Les Miles, and that they're going to be going after Herman within their own state. You've got to be aware of these situations. That way you can prepare for them and be ready to act as soon as the season's done. I think they did their due diligence with a few, but 12 to 15 would be pushing it because those names weren't there.
And it's amazing, Eric. When Skip hired Les Miles, he interviewed Les Miles in person twice while Les was still the coach at Oklahoma State at the hotel when they were at the Bowl. He also interviewed Bobby Petrino in person. I don't think Joe Oliva interviewed Guilbeau or Herman in person.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
That's amazing. You can't just work on the phone.
You can't work off the phone. You can't work off through an agent either. At some point you got to go eye to eye.
Right. Now some coaches have a contract where they can't do that.
Right.
But I don't think that's the case with either of these. And you could still go face to face with the agents and just try harder is what I was saying.
Ed Ogeron is the coach now. I've said it all week long on the radio show that he cannot micromanage this program. He's almost got to be the guy that he's been in the interim. And I think it's very difficult when it's your job, when you're on the line now, okay, your reputation, you're trying to now let people know that Ole Miss, you were a young coach, you didn't really realize what was going on, you've grown from that now. I'm wondering how difficult it's going to be for him not to micromanage, to be that CEO. I think that, be that master motivator, be that guy that is the recruiting guru, the guy that can close recruits, and let your coaches coach. They promised, Ed Ogeron has promised the best staff in America. They've already locked up Dave Aranda. We'll get into that in a moment. Now the question begs, who will be the offensive coordinator? I'll take you first, Chris. A lot of talk about Lane Kiffin. He's up for the Houston job. They're talking about him in Oregon. As these jobs come up, he's on the short list on all these jobs. So even though there's a relationship between Ogeron and Kiffin, I don't know if everybody thinks they can put all their eggs in Kiffin's basket right now, because there's a pretty good chance he's going to get a second chance to be a head coach.
Yeah, I think that Houston would be a great fit for him all along. He's got the athletes. I think he needs to work there, and it's a program that's just about on that level that would be a great move for him. I think but it is a big issue because LSU is making these moves on quarterbacks and offering the Hawaiian quarterback to
Don't even try.
Yeah, I'm not going to try it.
I don't think we even have to say it because I think he's going to Alabama, but go ahead.
And so they're making these moves on quarterbacks without having an offensive coordinator in the building yet. And so I think it's a little bit risky right now because Miles Brennan is all of a sudden up in the air, the four-star quarterback from Mississippi, and hearing other people. And you've got Lowell Narcisse, who's had two torn ACLs. So I think that offensive coordinator issue is going to help or harm them when it comes to recruiting, because now you have a lot of wide receivers that LSU needs and a future quarterback that are all in limbo waiting to see who Ed Ogeron brings in. Which
means that they got to move quickly, but you're kind of handcuffed right now, Glenn, because some of the candidates you'd like to bring in are looking at head coaching jobs.
Sure. I like Ed Ogeron's chutzpah, if you will. I mean, he's being bold. I mean, here's a guy that's working for Alabama and a quarterback who's committed for Alabama, and he's basically saying he's going to get both of them, and that's LSU's rival. So that's pretty impressive, just for trying to do that. And, Lane Kiffin, he tried to get the Fresno State job, which is where he went to school, I think a year ago, and he couldn't get that. He may not be able to get a head coaching job just yet, and it's not so much damaged goods as he's done poorly as a head coach. Though he did good at Tennessee, but he was only there 1 year. So if he doesn't get a head coaching job, I think LSU has a great chance of getting him, because Coach Saban, I think, figured he'd only have Lane for 3 years, and he hired Steve Sarkisian in September, partly because he could kind of, Sarkisian and Lane are the same, run the same offense, so he could kind of move right in, so that could happen, and that would be great for LSU if they could get Lane Kiffin, because it almost wouldn't matter who the quarterback is, because Lane has turned in champion quarterbacks out of whoever he had at Alabama. The first one was a converted wide receiver, if you remember, and then Jay Coker, the next one, was beat out by the converted wide receiver, and he got both of them very far, and then he's done a great job this year with a true freshman. So, I mean, just imagine him with Danny Etling, who's I think has really improved this season, and Brandon Harris might reconsider leaving if Lane Kiffin comes in, because he'll have a shot. So it could be interesting.
What about some fallback guys? Sarkisian's been mentioned. Major Applewhite's been mentioned. What are you hearing? If Kiffin's not the guy, I got to believe, unlike Joe Oliva, Ogeron, when he walked in with that binder, he had more than one offensive coordinator on that list.
I think Ogeron will do a better search for offensive coordinator than Oliva did for him. But I think, Ed Ogeron, he's worked for so many coaches. He can call Pete Carroll. There's a lot. He's worked from coast to coast. So I would think he's going to be able to find an offensive coordinator. Now, there may be some guy out there that we don't know about. There's really not a lot of household names who are great offensive coordinators other than Lane Kiffin. I'm sure there's some more. But I feel confident that Ed is going to be able to hire good coaches everywhere.
Well, what are your thoughts on offensive coordinator if ultimately Lane Kiffin ends up with a head coaching job?
Well, like Glenn said, and one of the knocks on Ed Ogeron that could turn into a positive, maybe LSU did do this to save money, but you've got that budget. Didn't take long to lock up Dave Aranda. You've got the money to go hire the best offensive coordinator out there. LSU, even in the past, has shown, Cam Cameron, $1.2 million. They're not afraid to pay the big money for assistants. That's why a lot of coaches come to the SEC in the first place. More money, you can keep assistants. I think Brett Bielema at Wisconsin said he was tired of losing assistants. And so you come to the SEC and you get the power at LSU. That is a big leveraging factor. And whether it's Kiffin, whether it's Sarkisian, I think they are in a good position to bring in who can fit that offense best, who can work with their quarterbacks best, and who can push them forward, because the talent's there. It's going to be there. It's just getting the most out of it, which they haven't in the past, and that's what did Les Miles in.
Strong offensive coordinators, what Ed Orgeron said he wanted in his initial press conference, maybe running a hybrid spread, pro-style offense. He wants a dual-threat quarterback. Obviously, the guy they have on the team right now, and that was their starter, Danny Etling, is not that type of quarterback. What do you see with that? I mean, is this something they're going to ease into? What type of offense do you think they're going to run? Do we even know what they're going to run right now?
Well, Ed's talking like a true recruiter, because a couple of weeks ago he was saying he wanted the drop back guy. Now he's saying he wants a spread. But really, the best thing to do is a combination of it. I mean, that's what Alabama has done.
Right.
Even under Kiffin. I mean, they've had combination of drop back. But, maybe down the road, the dual action quarterback will be the thing. But I'm just going to have it hard to believe that somebody's going to come in and beat Danny Etling for next season, because I really think he's improved as this season's going on. Ed may have some new quarterbacks committed to show the new coordinator, as opposed to the other way around. So he's definitely shooting for the stars.
You cover a lot of high school football. Miles Brennan has been an LSU commit. There was a lot of rumors out there that he had decommitted to LSU yesterday. His father comes out. He comes out and says it's not a decommit. Basically, he just wants to kind of look at the landscape, what's going on, which, again, you got to give the kid a lot of credit. It's a tough decision. Even though you may be an LSU Tiger through and through, you got to look at what's best for you. And if ultimately they go with an offense that is not going to utilize his skill set, well, obviously at that point he's got to look out for himself. Your thoughts on Brennan really not decommitting, but still leaving the door open for other universities? Yeah,
from what we were told at Fox 8, it was all good up until that offer went out to Tua, the Alabama commit. Miles Brennan's dad said, he didn't even hear calls from other coaches. He was that committed to LSU, and all of a sudden that has changed. I don't know if it's so much the dual threat quarterback issue so much as just LSU putting themselves out there saying, hey, we're still looking. That doesn't actually give off confidence. To what Glenn was saying, for next year, it's going to be hard for somebody to beat out Etling. I think no matter who the offensive coordinator is and what he wants out of his quarterback, whether he wants him to be able to truly run the read option and be able to execute it successfully, you've got to go with the quarterback who's not going to turn the ball over. Mm-hmm. That last throw that Brandon Harris made against Wisconsin still irks me, because I don't know what he was thinking or doing. Hopefully he learns from that, but at the same time, if he hasn't, there's no way you're going to beat out Etling. So I think whoever it is, Etling's got that job for now, but as far as the recruiting and the guys of the future, dual threat could be where Ed Orgeron wants to go. And let's not forget about Lindsey Scott from Zachary, who's on the roster as well.
And Taylor made that offense, right?
Yeah, if I'm Lindsey Scott, and I was thinking about this earlier, I'm wondering, what do I have to do to get noticed or get my name out there and mentioned? I'm on the roster. People are going nuts over a trio of quarterbacks who aren't there. Meanwhile, you have a guy who just threw for 300 yards against Texas A&M, and then there's Lindsey Scott, who can be in the running for a starting job as well.
Right.
So there's a lot up in the air. And again, they still don't have an offensive coordinator, which is why I think they're playing the game backwards a little bit right now. Mm-hmm. Get your guy. I know if it's Kiffin, you can't do anything about it right now.
Yes.
But you want to get that locked up so you can have some stability going forward.
Yep. I'm going to try this. Is it Tua Tagovailoa? Is the five-star quarterback out of Hawaii?
That's close enough.
Yeah,
that's about as close as we're going to get. His father said they were flattered by the offer from LSU, but he is he is committed to Alabama. Is going to be an early entry. I love the moxie going after Alabama's guy.
Sure.
But it doesn't look like this guy is coming to LSU.
Right.
So have you really kind of maybe spoiled the soup, so to speak, with Miles Brennan now that you went out and offered a guy that really you have no chance of getting?
Right. Well, he said in the USA Today story yesterday, one of the high school writers, national high school writers, USA Today Network, quoted to the Hawaiian quarterback that his commitment to Alabama stands, and that's that.
Right.
Is what he said. Now later on, he basically said, "Well, we're flattered by LSU and so forth." But, if Lane Kiffin leaves, and Mike Detillier, by the way, I just read a story a few minutes ago. He's quoted as saying that he thinks Lane Kiffin's last game in Alabama is Saturday, and Mike's very close to Coach Orgeron, obviously. So, but that could happen very fast. But I agree with Miles Brennan and his father. I mean, LSU's obviously going through a lot of transition, so let's not decommit. His dad said they didn't decommit, but we're not totally with you. We're going to take some other visits, maybe talk to some other schools. So he's doing the same thing LSU's doing.
And I think it was in that same story I read that the Hawaiian quarterback, he's close with Nick Saban as well. He said he talks to Nick Saban every Sunday. So I'm not putting this strictly on a Lane Kiffin's going to bring him wherever issue.
That's true.
Think if you want to go to Alabama, Saban's got enough pull to get you to Alabama. They can put a quarterback. They've had so many different types of quarterbacks and won many championships with them.
Yes.
So I think if you're committed to Saban in that program, it's going to be hard to pull him, no matter if the coordinator changes. Now I will say, among recruiting, there's just so much that's unknown at times. Whether these guys are just putting this information out to troll, like to the very end, you're going to get offers from schools. They're not going to stop calling just because you're committed somewhere. This offer could be a shot in the dark. It could be in premonition that Kiffin may be there, but whatever it is, I think there's a point where you read too much into it, and it's a deep rabbit hole you can go down with recruiting, and it can get confusing. It can get a little bit crazy, but the timetable is certainly sped up with Tua, and then of course Lowell Narcisse, who's set to early enroll at LSU.
And Tua needs to realize that Jalen Hurts
he's not going anywhere.
He might be there for 4 years.
Right, could be, and again that means you'd be battling there. Where again maybe go to another school where you're the odds-on favorite to be able to get the job. The biggest recruit that Orgeron has gotten so far is Dave Aranda. There was a lot of talk that maybe he might be going to the University of Texas with Herman. Obviously, he was going to be the hot candidate out there as a defensive coordinator. They were able to pay him, if I'm not mistaken, the highest amount of money that an assistant coach is getting in college football, and gave him the title of associate head coach. To me, that's the biggest recruit that he's got so far. I
agree. I would say that getting Aranda is arguably as important or more important than who the head coach was going to be was retaining Aranda and what he could do with that defense. They're obviously going to lose a lot on that side of the ball. They lose a lot everywhere. So you're going to want a guy who can continue to build. And I think Aranda, what's been impressive about him is he changed the scheme of that defense and put guys in a position where they played their best, and then you've even seen them move roles a little bit depending on how they're playing in that 3-4 scheme. And so the longer Aranda's there and the more stability this defense gets, because Aranda was their third defensive coordinator in as many years, the better they are going forward. And that's what Ed Orgeron needs in a program that's seen change at head coach, offensive coordinator. You don't want another one at defensive coordinator, especially when you have the best one in the country.
Right. What can you add?
Well, I think you might have Aranda for a couple of years, really solidify that. So just work on the offense and, stay out of it when you hire this coordinator, and it could really work.
You've only seen one coach let go. Bradley Dale Pivodo was the special teams coordinator. He was let go. He's not being retained by Ed Orgeron. Anything happening behind the scenes there, Glenn, on why that happened?
No, I mean, I think it's obvious special teams at LSU have underachieved for years under Bradley Dale. He just couldn't get it together. I mean, this year was better, but you expect more from a school known for recruiting and speed. You expect more from the special teams. It's never really been a weapon in recent years. It really hadn't been since probably 2011. So that's been underachieving. So I think Coach Orgeron wants a little more spice on special teams. And there might be some other changes, too.
He was thought to be a great recruiter, and that was maybe a little bit of a surprise, thought to be one of the top 3 recruiters on that staff.
Yeah, he certainly had that reputation. From what I read, though, it was a very classy move. He told his recruits, go to LSU. He honored that, no matter where he ends up or what he does from here. But that is a good move. But like Glenn was saying, if I'm Ed Ogeron and I just got my dream job, I'm going to tailor up all the places that need to be better because you need to assemble this staff that you call the best staff in America. And obviously, special teams was lagging.
Yes.
And the other thing, LSU has too many assistant coaches who are known for recruiting.
Okay.
They need assistant coaches who are known for coaching their position. And I think there's going to be some changes in those areas.
Bobby April is supposedly rumored to be the next special teams coordinator. Obviously, a lot of people here know him from his time in coming up in Chalmette, St. Bernard Parish. Did a stint with the Saints. He's been a special teams guru. That would be a coup for the Tigers to get a coach like that.
Yeah, and again, he would not come in as a recruiter.
Right.
You know, he'd come in as a special
As a
teams
coach.
expert.
Right.
And that's what they need.
Guys, I got to believe that at this point, Ed Ogeron, $3.5 million a year, five years. We understand no buyout. Am I right on that? No buyout. I mean, how many times does that happen in college football today?
Right.
But I believe Joe Oliva and Ogeron are tied at the hip now. If Ogeron does not, again, continue to recruit well, continue and again put this team at a championship level as he has promised, then ultimately I don't think Joe Oliva is going to be picking the next coach.
Yeah, I would agree. I wrote the other week that this is going to be Joe Oliva's legacy. It's the biggest hire he's made, and some of his other hires haven't worked out well. That's tying his track record down as well. And so when you make this decision and you do it somewhat hastily, but at the same time you did have a year to make the decision, you've got to be ready to go as it goes. And Ogeron holds Oliva's legacy in his hands.
Right.
And at $3.5 million with little or no buyout, it's almost like he's a glorified interim coach still. Because if he falls on his face, I don't think he will. It will unfortunately it'll be easier to fire him.
Yes.
Because of that no financial commitment. And at the same time, Ed is kind of like a coach in waiting, even though he didn't know it, because he was there for a good almost 2 years, watching how everything was going, and the program wasn't bad. But so he can really see what to improve, and the status quo was preserved, which some people have a problem with.
I mentioned can't be a micromanager, has to be a CEO, has to be that recruiting closer, has to be that master motivator. What do you guys think? What does he have to do to be successful at LSU? Chris?
I think he's got to continue with a lot of what he's already done, and that is don't meddle don't meddle in the offense. Let your coaches coach. Now, for better or worse, that may doom you at times, but that's why you go and get your best offensive coordinator. Be the motivator. Be the guy that the players want to run through a wall for. We saw that at USC. We saw it through a 5-2 record as an interim head coach at LSU. It'll be very interesting to see now that that kind of honeymoon period is over, where he's here to stay and he's got new guys coming in and some older guys leaving, and you lose a lot of leadership. How much can Ed Ogeron continue to push that button with this team and get them going? Because they're going to be rocky times ahead, I think, with how much you lose as far as leadership and guys going to the draft and seniority. There's going to be rocky times ahead. How he reacts to that, that will be the biggest tell for Ed Ogeron.
Yeah, I think the main thing he needs, he could meddle on defense a little bit. He is a heck of a defensive line coach to where he's helping Aranda and not hurting him. I think that could happen. And I think he needs to get the sideline straightened up, because we saw that at the end of the Florida game.
Right.
Les might as well still been there because it was complete chaos. So he needs to figure out, probably get the coordinator on the sideline. I would hope that would help. And he needs to step up the discipline. I think Coach Miles was always a little laissez-faire, not really that tough on discipline. Let some guys get away with stuff I didn't think they should have. Jordan Jefferson, Jeremy Hill. And Orgeron's already showed a little more discipline than Coach Miles so far, and he's benched some people for gaining weight. Javante Valentine and Jazz Ferguson has been suspended for some time now, and so I think that would really help the program if he put his foot down in discipline. And he's always been kind of a disciplinary guy.
Right. Realistically, how many juniors are going to bypass the NFL? What do you think?
If I could run through it in my head real quick, you maybe lose Malachi Dupree, obviously Leonard Fournette, Jamal Adams.
You got Godchild. The only two that I think that they maybe have a chance to keep, in my opinion, would be Godchild and Dupree. When you talk about Adams, Fournette, I'm trying to think of some other juniors. Maybe, Glenn, you can chime in.
Well,
here.
I think Fournette's the only first-round pick.
Right.
I mean, Jamal Adams, maybe.
A lot of NFL scouts believe that despite what has happened at LSU, that he's a top 15 pick.
Okay, well, but they've had a lot of players that kind of slipped right at the end, like Jalen Mills last year, but he was never first-round material like Adams. But I would say Fournette, maybe Adams. I don't think Dupree. He hasn't had the numbers for that. I think he might be more second or third round. He would probably serve himself well to stay, especially with the new offensive coordinator coming in. But, they lose a lot of seniors. I mean, Kendall Beckwith, Davius White. So they're going to have their work cut out for them. But I like the fact that Etling's back. The line, though it's not a great line, they return most of it. And, hey, they might have the best back in the country coming back in Darius Geis.
Guys, quickly, before we go to break, thoughts on what bowl they may end up in?
I'm feeling the Citrus Bowl right now. Obviously, the Sugar Bowl, I think, is out of the window. The College Football Playoff Committee shot that one down with Auburn not falling too much and LSU several spots behind them.
Yeah, they definitely helped themselves with a spectacular victory over Texas A&M, all that offense they showed. So either the Citrus Bowl or perhaps the Outback Bowl I've heard as well. But I think the Citrus Bowl may be the most logical landing.
You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports each and every Thursday night right here on WLAE with our live broadcast at 6 p.m. We have a rebroadcast every Friday night at 9 p.m. on Pelican Sports Television. That's in the New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Lafayette markets, and at 10 p.m. right here on WLAE. Glenn Guilbeau of Gannett News, Chris Hagan of Fox 8 Sports here in New Orleans are our guest. When we come back, we'll talk a little New Orleans Saints. We'll open the phone lines in just a few minutes as well. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher, and I'm going anywhere.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Amco Fence, locally owned and operated since 1976. Fully licensed and insured and a member of the BBB, Amco serves both residential and commercial customers. If you're looking to repair, replace, or install a fence for security or aesthetic reasons, Amco Fence supplies wooden, metal, chain link, vinyl, and ornamental or automatic gates. Amco aims to satisfy your fencing needs. Amco Fence, 504-468-9559 or AmcoFenceCompany.com.
TikTok Cafe, located on Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie, is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Our menu offers breakfast dishes like our Western omelet made from scratch biscuits, grits, egg sunny side up, and lunch specials like our homemade cheeseburgers with a side of golden brown fries. Don't forget about our weekday lunch special, and that every Tuesday is steak night. TikTok Cafe, open 24/7 at Causeway South at the I-10 in Metairie.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Chris Hagan and Glenn Guilbeau are with us tonight on the panel. Guys, Saints beat the Rams 49-21. They're now 5-6. They're trying to get back to 500, trying to get to 500 this week against the Lions. Probably the most complete game of the season, guys, when you look at offense, defense. 555 yards of offense, 49 points. The defense shut out the Rams in the second half. I have not seen Peyton so animated on the sidelines since maybe the Super Bowl year. Obviously, that was because of Greg Williams. Let's start off, first of all, talking a little bit about that particular situation, because there's been so much reported on that this week about this was kind of payback for Greg Williams for what happened with the Bounty Gate. And I'm one that has always believed and has said this on the radio show, even going back to when the Bounty Gate situation happened, that Peyton micromanages this franchise. He knows everything that's going on in that building. He changed the configuration of the building so that he could have more of a closed door atmosphere, so that the outsiders couldn't get in to find out what's going on within his compound. You have Joe Vitt, that was the assistant head coach, the linebacker coach, who again was rumored to be the go-to guy between him and Williams, letting him know what was going on the defensive side of the ball. You have the NFL, which again had said that they had told the Saints to cease and desist with this bounty situation, but yet again they didn't. So I'm not buying this Sergeant Schultz I know nothing move out of Peyton when you start talking about the bounty situation. I don't think you can throw it all on Greg Williams. Now,
no way.
The way he looked on Sunday was like, Greg Williams sold us down the river, or Greg Williams did something without my knowledge. And look, I'm glad he got motivated. I'm glad they put 49 points on the Rams and really played their best game of the season. But I'm not buying into this.
No.
I didn't know what Greg Williams was doing in the defensive offices.
The only payback Greg Williams deserves is a thank you for the Super Bowl title.
Amen.
Because they haven't had a defense like that really, not since Greg Williams left. I mean, he had some good defenses after. I think the 2010 defense wasn't bad. 2011 was good until the end of the season. But I mean, he made so much out of what he had, and without Greg Williams, the Saints don't have that Super Bowl. And Sean Payton is the reason for Bountygate. He let it keep on going after he was warned to stop it. He's also the reason they had the Vicodin scandal. It's all on Sean Payton because he runs everything, and he's messed up quite a bit. And if he'd have listened more, he might not have got punished for the whole year, which set the franchise back. So I don't hold any ill will toward Greg Williams. I mean, he's probably the greatest defensive coordinator the Saints have ever had.
Yeah, I think there's I've seen two sides of it. There's the people that are entertained by the revenge factor and the Saints putting up 49 points and trick plays and all of it being fun. But then there's a part of it, you look at this, it's kind of petty, It's kind of
so long ago.
Yeah, it's got the bitter X feel all over it. And if you're a Saints fan, you're looking at this, where was this motivation against the Falcons, the Giants, the Chiefs? There are a number of games you can list earlier in the season with lesser defenses in the Rams, because it's a good Rams defense, that where is that motivation to go out and win those games? Because then, you aren't a 5-6 football team right now. You probably have a winning record.
Yes.
And so if they go out and lay an egg against the Lions, it looks even worse, because the last week, because you're playing your ex-defensive coordinator, you have this motivation, and you go out and play a lesser defense like the Lions. So all that being said, going forward, I think that the Saints have to show that they can do that on a weekly basis, and not just because they're having a good time running up the score on an old teammate.
Yeah. The other part of this was Brandon Cooks this week. Brandon Cooks has been a pretty solid player for this team, from what we understand, a good locker room guy, and goes on social media to express his displeasure about not being targeted last week. I mean, Brees is a guy that spreads the ball around. I mean, he hit 28 of 36 last week, 4 touchdowns. He had a touchdown, a running touchdown, no interceptions. It just happened to be this week, the Rams took him out. And, for him to come out and to do that, I thought was just, first of all, you don't have the skins on the wall to be able to do that anyway. And I was really
kind of fantasy football.
Right, I was taken back by it. I really was.
Sure.
And then to hear Breeze's comments that this is something that he has to do continually. He has to be basically a locker room lawyer with the receivers to kind of keep them, from complaining about not getting the ball. Man, they could be with another team where they're running the ball 40 times a game and only getting, throwing the ball 25 times a game.
Yeah, I think it was really out of character, because it's not like Brandon Cooks is a, Brandon Marshall type target where he's getting 11 plus targets a game, or he's that one receiver. The Saints have long been known for making targets out of everyone. This year, you could argue it's probably better to be a wide receiver on the Saints, because you don't have the Jimmy Graham or the Darren Sproles that's taking even more targets at tight end or out of the backfield. Cooks has 2 of the 4 longest touchdowns in the NFL this year. When he gets it going, there's no doubt that he can be a big playmaker. He's made some catches I didn't think he was capable of making this year. So I think if he's worried about being forgotten or anything like that, I think fans know he's there. Obviously, defenses know he's there as a weapon. So that's really out of character for him to be upset about the targets. Be happy you won, because since Cooks has been on this team, that's something they haven't done a lot of.
Right.
Yeah, and Cooks needs to remember that Breeze makes targets out of receivers that don't get to be targets anywhere else.
Yeah.
I mean, we saw what happened to Lance Moore after he left Drew Brees. Look what happened to Jimmy Graham after he left Drew Brees. And part of the reason Brandon might not have been targeted as much, is because Thomas has really blossomed, So Drew Brees, to me, he's one of the most amazing quarterbacks in NFL history because he's never had, in my opinion, a great receiver. Mm-hmm. He's had some pretty good ones. He's never had a great one. He makes them better than they are.
He might have a great one coming up.
Now.
Yeah. Go ahead. Why don't you take it from there?
Yeah. I mean, Michael Thomas, what he's done, as good as he is in the red zone, I think he gives you everything Colston did, and I'm not going to go ahead and compare them right now. I think Colston's done a lot and earns that respect. Michael Thomas still has a ways to go, but what he can do after the catch and running after the catch, and what he gives you in the red zone with his range, it's outstanding and it's fun to watch. And he's a guy who's just about his business. He's pretty quiet, pretty level-headed, but he'll let you know that he's there on the field, and obviously he has Brees' respect.
I mean, precocious. I mean, when you see this guy come into the league to be able to do what he's done, and of course he's got that family tree of having obviously a professional wide receiver as a relative, but he's been an outstanding. The draft has been pretty outstanding this year, really, for the Saints, with a lot of contributors. The problem's been on special teams. They come out, they hire Kevin O'Day to help with the snap, the kick, and the hold. If you look back on this season of self-inflicted wounds, and the Saints don't make the playoffs, I think you're going to look at the special teams, and you have to point the finger right there.
Yeah, I think you do. You look back at the Raiders game. I'm not putting the missed field goal from 60-plus yards on Lutz, but the missed 50-yarder. You have that one. Then you have the only touchdown the Giants scored. Then you have, obviously, the play that lost it against the Broncos, and then right before the half, almost the same situation with the Panthers and Luke Kuechly. So there's a lot of games that have come down to special teams. It's an area that it should be so simple. Obviously, with the extra point back, a couple yards, you see a lot of teams missing them, but not necessarily getting them blocked. So I think getting that short up was the right move to make. And it's a tough spot to put a rookie in. Yeah. It's almost unfair to Will Lutz you have this kicking competition, and then you get rid of the kicker who won it to bring in Lutz. You're asking for all this extra attention to be on him. And it's tough. It's tough for a rookie.
866-3200 if you'd like to get involved in tonight's show. Glenn, what are your thoughts? Special teams have really been a disaster for the Saints this year, have cost them. Obviously, they were much better last week, but you got 5 games and little margin for error going forward.
And it's a shame because they could really be a couple of games over 500 right now, and that's one of the reasons why I was really impressed with their performance Sunday, because at 4-6 everything looked bad, and I thought there was a chance they might nail it in there. But they've been pretty competitive as a team this year and hung in there, and they still have a shot. Hopefully they don't have to win out, but they're going to probably have to come close to winning out to make the playoffs.
You think they got to run the table to make the playoffs?
I think they've got to come close. If not, they've got to get some help. I don't know if they'll catch the Giants, but maybe the Redskins with that tie in their schedule. If the Redskins drop a game or two, the Saints can, but they got to win 4 of the next 5, I'd say.
Let's head to the phone lines. Tom is in Kenner. Tom, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Tom.
Hey, guys. I wanted to comment about the special teams coach at LSU. I think we can name a handful of errors that were made by him throughout the years. And I was watching this past weekend, or whatever night it was on, and A&M scored, and they had 10 guys in the field for the extra point. It just seems like there was just a multitude of errors by that guy. I'm glad to see he's gone. And I was going to ask you if you know of any other coaches they may cut, but I think you kind of answered that already. The Tom Herman coaching, it'd be fun to see what happens next year, how he does at Texas versus Orgeron. I mean, you get 2 great teams, so we didn't get Tom Herman. Now we can kind of compare records, so that should be quite interesting. And finally, maybe you guys can comment on Fournette, why he didn't make the trip this last game. There was some rumors about him, which I hope aren't true, but I want to see if you guys know anything. I'll hang up and listen. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, first of all, Tom Herman does not go into as good a situation as Coach Orgeron. Texas has lost for at least 3 straight seasons. Maybe the year before Strong got there.
A lot of good young players on LSU's team.
Right, and just more used to winning, and they're going to return pretty good team. I mean, Darius Geis, Danny Etling, they've still got some very good defensive players. So, Herman might take him a while to get it going. As far as Fournette not making the trip, I don't think people realize this. A lot of times when a player's hurt, it's better for them to rehab back home. I remember Jamarcus Russell did that when he was hurt going into the 05 SEC championship game. He stayed home to rehab. So did Kirsten Pittman at the time. And a lot of times players stay home because of the facility that LSU has. So I think that's all that was.
Nothing nefarious there?
No, I don't think so. Not at all.
Sent to Mike in Covington. Mike, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, Mike.
Yeah, I was wondering if y'all think LSU would keep their offensive line coach. It seems like every year you hear how they're supposed to be so big and powerful, but in games they just, like Alabama, and I know you're talking about a beast there, just don't seem to be able to block and for the running backs and quarterbacks. I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you. Any thoughts on the offensive line coach?
One thing that comes to mind, I want to say it was one of the press conferences. It was a couple of weeks into Ed Orgeron's reign, maybe less, but he mentioned that he gave Jeff Grimes, the offensive line coach, permission to make some changes, move some guys around, do as he sees fit, and almost hinting at he was a little bit handcuffed before and maybe wasn't able to. I think it's a group that has underperformed a little bit. They haven't been the lines that we've seen in some of their championship seasons, especially you get exposed against the Alabamas and even in the past a little bit against Arkansas, not being able to move the ball. But I'm not sure how much change happens there right away.
Yeah, and when Jeff Grimes came to LSU, he was at Auburn the year before, and he was at I think Virginia Tech the year before, and really was not thought of as a great offensive line coach. He came to LSU as a recruiter, and I said that before. They got too many guys on that staff that are known for recruiting. Now, to Grimes' credit, they don't have great talent on the offensive line, not like they've had in just a few years ago. But I think they got plenty of other recruiters. Ed Orgeron can find you some offensive line. They might need a down in the trenches, literally and figuratively, offensive line coach.
And some have said that the first place they got to concentrate is the tackle position. They've got to really go out and they've got to get true tackles instead of, again, trying to move a guard to a tackle, a center to a tackle. A lot of said that Posick is a natural tackle, and they've had him at center.
Sure.
So it'll be interesting to see how Orgeron goes out and restocks the offensive line.
No question. I mean, he said after the Alabama game, we got to stop blocking against first-round draft choices with second and third or worse draft choices. I mean, Kirsten Pittman, great kid, but he was like a 3-star recruit. He's probably the least talented left tackle they've had in years because LSU's had some very good left tackles, Lyle Collins to name one. But I think that should be the top priority is offensive linemen in recruiting.
Chris?
Yeah, I think it was one of those areas that Ed Orgeron was talking about. They have to vastly improve. When asked about that Alabama game and knowing that's where you're going to have judgment every year, it's been obvious. It's been on the table for years. That's where you need to be better. You've got to protect the quarterback. He was big mentioning that going into Alabama. They weren't able to do it very well. You let guys like Cam Robinson get out of the state. That's what it comes down to is going out and getting those guys, making sure you have the best guys there. Because, look, Alabama's had some great running backs. LSU's had the better running backs the last couple of years. But if you can't block, they're not going to get him.
When Mark Ingram was with Alabama, they had a stat that he wasn't touched for 4 yards.
Yes, ridiculous.
I think I said Kirsten Pittman was a left tackle. It was K.J. Malone.
K.J. Malone, right.
Kirsten Pittman was a great player, defensive end.
Guys, we saw Bradley Del Pivoto let go by Ed Orgeron. Obviously, you can't let the entire staff go. You got a bowl game to play. I was a little surprised that again, he was let go so early. How much of a turnover do you think that we may see in this staff?
I think there might be 2 or 3 more changes. Corey Raymond, great recruiter, hasn't been a coach that long. They might need an upgrade there in the secondary. But, he may stay on staff because he's such a recruiter. But I think you could see new offensive coordinator, maybe 1 or 2 more assistants.
Yeah, I want to say, Jabbar Jalouk and Damian Craig, the way they've been recruiting and out in these visits, they're some of the guys that are going to be there. But like Glenn said, it's an interesting dynamic. Ed Orgeron being such a good recruiter himself, you wonder does he lean on the side of the coaches who are great recruiters and keeping them or the guys who can coach because that's what could ultimately keep him his job.
Yeah, and that's a great point because if you've already got some pretty good recruiters, including himself, then why would you not want to go with the strongest position coaches you can get?
Right.
And he said that he wants the best coaches in America. Because,
Right.
again, it's one thing getting recruits, another thing coaching them up. And that's been a problem at LSU. You know, guys go to the NFL, they flourish. You kind of wonder, wait a minute, you know, this guy couldn't get on the field here at LSU. What's going on? Or he underachieved at LSU, and then all of a sudden these guys blossom when they get to the NFL. And you have to wonder about that. Let's see if we grab a couple calls before we get out of here this evening. Chris is in New Orleans. Chris, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports.
Hey, Eric.
Hey, Chris.
A quick question. I wanted to ask about recruiting, and obviously it's about wide receivers, what you guys were just touching on. You got two wide receivers at Carr, and I was just trying to get Chris and I think Glenn take on the two wide receivers at the Carr. Thank you.
You cover high school football?
Yeah, I think he's talking about Racey McMath and Dejon Dixon. Those guys look identical in pads. They're both about 6'4", 6'5" range. They've got speed. They can catch the ball. Racey McMath looks like a guy who can play right away. I think he's got an offer from LSU. I know the way that these classes work, you save a spot for a guy sometimes. I think Devontae Smith is leading the way at receiver. He's up at a meet in Louisiana, so maybe you're saving a spot for him, but I think Racey McMath is a plug-and-play type of guy with his size and ability. He is a man on the field among boys, so it would be good for Ed Orgeron to keep them in state, especially if they're going to go to the spread offense.
I don't cover recruiting, but LSU has never had any trouble getting receivers, even when they have bad quarterbacks.
Which is amazing to me.
Yeah,
honestly,
so
really
this year they should be able to double it.
Right. Let's go to Covington and John. John, welcome to Inside New Orleans Sports. Hey, John.
Yes, good evening. I was just wondering, y'all were talking about Sean Payton being so animated on the sidelines there, and I was just wondering if he was calling most of the plays that day, the offensive plays, and if that's why he was so animated, whereas if somebody else would call the plays, he wouldn't be so animated, because it seems like most of the plays he did, they all worked.
Right. I think he said this week that he was calling the plays, but the special situations, offensive coordinator was doing that.
Yeah, from what I read, it was Pete Carmichael in situational downs, and then Sean Payton calling most of the plays, which I don't think he had done previously this year. That could lead to it, but again, if that's working for you, and if that's the motivation, you've got to find that in other weeks and not just against the Rams.
And he is such a good play caller.
Oh, he
Sean
is.
Payton.
I mean, that's
it's kind of tough that maybe he feels like he's got to keep an overview with as much problems as they've had on defense. But if they can get the defense together, I think I'd rather have Sean calling the plays.
Although I will say this, Glenn, I really like the job that Dennis Allen has done this year.
Oh, I would much improved than the previous two.
Yeah, I mean,
no
really.
question.
I mean, and look, his ability to be able to adjust on the fly, adjust at halftime, we've seen it in each and every game, and playing with guys in a lot of cases that are coming off the street.
And one thing I get is it feels like the offense is not in panic mode all the time. It's like they have a little confidence in their defense that they don't have to score in 2 seconds like they did with Ryan and Spagnuolo. My goodness.
Chris, what can you add?
Yeah, what they've been able to do, especially that early part of the season, you don't have Delvin Breaux, you don't have Sheldon Rankins, James Laurinaitis and Stephon Anthony don't work out at middle linebacker. He's had to make the most with guys that you didn't necessarily see as being starters on this Saints team, whether it's been dialing up some really timely blitzes or just mixing it up to give some quarterbacks some different looks. They've done enough. The Saints have been in most of these games.
Yeah.
I think they've had 8 games within a possession. So whether they've been on the losing end or not, I don't think you can always put it on the defense because, as we mentioned, special teams played a big role in a lot of them. It's easy to pile on the Saints defense, but it hasn't been on them this year.
Yeah, I agree. Chris Hagan, Glenn Guilbeau, thanks so much for being with us tonight on Inside New Orleans Sports.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Remember, there's a rebroadcast of this program each and every Friday night right here on WLAE-TV at 10 p.m. Also statewide on Pelican Sports Television. That is at 9 p.m. every Friday night. You catch me on the radio, 990 a.m. WGSO. That's 11 a.m. until 1 p.m. weekdays. The TuneIn Radio app is a great way to catch the show if you're outside the listening area of WGSO. Also, you can listen on your smartphone, your tablet, as well as your cell phone if you do the TuneIn Radio app. And also, don't forget, you can download the podcast or listen live at ericasher.com. Every single episode of Inside New Orleans Sports can be seen at ericasher.com as well. Special thanks to the WLAE production staff, including Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Kenny Juno, Naila Jones, Christian Metter, and, of course, my director, William Hill. Special thanks to our guests, also Chris Hagan and Glenn Guilbeau. Thanks so much for watching Inside New Orleans Sports. We'll catch you right back here next Thursday night for another edition. I'm Eric Asher. Have a great week.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is the first place award winner of the 2015 New Orleans Press Club's Excellence in Journalism Award for the category of Best TV Sports Show.